Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Hi students, in this session we are going to talk about components of the food. This is the chapter that tells us about that what are the different components of the food that makes it so important for us, right? So we are going to talk about the different kinds of components which help us in remaining healthy and which helps us in our growth, right? So first of all, let's remember what we have already studied in the chapter 1. We have studied about the different types of food that we eat in India, especially based on the region of origin. We have seen that different region in India we have different kinds of food, right? Also we saw that a meal could be composed of a chapati. It can be chapati, dal, potato curry or brinjal curry, and it can further include the other things like your buttermilk or curd or even pickles, right? Then again, based on a region, the meal can also be appam and fish curry. Then also it can be anything, right? It can be another type of food wherein the meal consists of rice, sambar, and maybe a vegetable like your bhindi, right? And all these things. So these are the different kinds of food that we have on in our country. Again, these are made up of different ingredients, and we see that different areas of our country have different kinds of food. So let's perform this activity and understand that what are the different kinds of food material that are found in different kinds of region. Usually when we see that whenever we are talking about a complete and a wholesome meal, we see that the meal usually contains one item of grain, it contains one item of dal or meat, it contains vegetables, and it contains other things. Now first of all, if we take an example of the area say Punjab, usually we have heard that people eat makki ki roti and they have sarson ka saag. So when we talk about the item of grain, so in this particular meal the makki ki roti is basically the grain item, that is the corn, right? Then the meal, the item of dal or meat, right? So over here we have the dal, that is the rajma, also called as the kidney beans, and the vegetable is the sarson ka saag or the mustard leaf curry, right? Then others, in others we can have the curd or we can have ghee, right? So if we talk about another region say Andhra, so over there what we have rice. Again, it is an item of grain because we know rice is a grain. Then in the item of dal we have tur dal and rasam, right? Then again, that in the vegetables we have kundru, that is again a kind of vegetable, and in others we might have buttermilk, pickle, and so on. So if we take an example, you yourself can do this activity wherein you can take a region, different types of components. Usually while you're traveling you may or may not get all these wholesome meal, right? So one meal might not contain all these things. So but when you think about it, why do you think that there is a need to have all these kind of food items, right? So while we are traveling, we may or may not get all these items. But when you think about it, when you're staying at home, your mom usually prepares food which has one item of grain, which has one item of dal, which or meat, it has one item of vegetables and other things. Why do you think you need so many different kinds of foods? Why do you think there is an importance that a meal, a wholesome meal, should contain an item of grain, it should contain an item of dal or meat, or it should contain one item of vegetable and different other things? The reason is that all these things contain different kinds of components which are important for us, which help us in the growth, and these components are called as nutrients, right? These nutrients help us in growth. It helps us in protection against the diseases. So why is it again important for you to have different kinds of meal? Let's understand that. If you look at the table that you did in the activity 1, you will find that each of the item was made up of grain or pulse or all these things. So the need for that is that food contains special components called as the nutrients, right? And these nutrients are important for your growth, right? They can they are needed by your body, and these nutrients can further be classified into carbohydrates, right? Proteins, fats, vitamins and minerals, right? These are the important components which help in the growth and protection of the body. Apart from that, the food also contains dietary fibers and water, right? So we know that water and dietary fibers are further needed by the body. Now when I say that a food material contains all these components, right? So there might be a question that you might think that what say if I'm talking about rice, do rice contain all of this? That means whether it contains carbohydrate, protein, fat, or combination of two or more nutrients. So to understand this, whether a food material contains a particular type of nutrient or not, we can conduct certain activities which we are going to do now. We are going to do tests for carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. These are the three tests which are quite easy to perform and all of you can do it. I will do it over here so that you will be able to observe that what are the food components that you can test to for the presence of carbohydrate in them, protein in them, and fat in them. You will be able to understand with these tests whether or not one kind of food, for example if I'm talking about pulses or dal, right? So whether dal contains carbohydrate, it contains protein or fats, or combination of all these three, right? And with the help of this we are going to with the help of these tests we are going to understand that what are the different components of the food and why is there such a huge distribution, such variety of food whenever we are having a meal, right? So we can we should when we are doing this activity we are going to record all our observations so that we are able to make an informed decision as to how the different food components are important and why do we need such variety in our food. So what kind of table we are going to make in this activity? Let's look at that.
So this is the activity that we are going to do, where we are going to test for starch. We are going to test different food items for starch, presence of protein and presence of fat. So let's say for example you have taken raw potato and you are testing it for starch, protein and fat, and suppose you get the positive test for starch, so you will write yes here and you will write no here, and so on. So in this way we will test all these items and we will understand that whether one food item contains all three components or all two components or it contains just one component, right? And then we will be able to understand that why is there a need for this diverse kind of food that we are eating, right? So before we start the testing of these nutrients, we should understand that you are going to use different chemicals which are which will be useful for us to test the presence of all these items. But before that we should take the precaution that we should not eat. We should take the precautions that we should not taste these chemicals and we should not eat them. And also we should understand and we should remember to write down our observation in this particular tables. That is very, very important, right? So let's move on and understand the testing for the starch.
Test that we perform. There is a certain test that we perform to see whether or not a particular food has starch in it, correct? What is that test? We can see a picture which is depicting iodine solution and potato. How do we go about doing this? It's a very simple experiment. It's a very simple activity which you can perform in your lab also, correct? So what you can do is, first you can prepare iodine solution. Once you have done that, take any food. We have depicted potato here. You can take anything. You can take potato, you can take rice, correct? You can either take them raw or you can also take boiled rice or cooked potato, whatever you want, you can do that, correct? So what do? We take this iodine solution and we add it to the, let's say, potato, correct? So what happens whenever a food contains starch? So the iodine reacts with starch and will give us a blue-black color pigment, correct? And that indicates the presence of starch, right? So whenever you are seeing this kind of blue black color, you will find, suppose you take anything and you put starch on it and you find this color, that means that this particular food material has starch in it. You can conduct this activity using any kind of raw material that you have, and I would suggest you go back to your school and you do this activity so that you can classify. It's a very fun activity. You can go ahead and use it on different kind of food products that you want to know whether they have starch in it or not.
To test for the presence of starch in food. Materials required: slice of bread, iodine solution, dropper. Method: place a drop of iodine solution on the slice of bread. You observe blue-black color where iodine solution is applied, indicating the presence of starch. To show the presence of proteins in food.
Materials required:
Egg white, copper sulfate solution, caustic soda, test tube, water, glass rod. Method: take egg white in water in a test tube and add 2 to 3 drops of copper sulfate solution and 10 to 12 drops of caustic soda solution. Shake well. You observe a purple or violet color that indicates the presence of proteins in the given sample.
Test for fats and oils. Materials required: oil or fat, coconut oil, sunflower oil, water, test tubes, test tube holder, test tube rack, droppers, Sudan 3 solution, white paper and measuring cylinder. Procedure: pour about 2 ml of oil in a test tube. Add an equal amount of water and shake well. Leave the mixture to settle for few minutes. Rub some fat on white paper. Hold the paper against light. Pour 2 ml of oil into another test tube. Add a few drops of Sudan 3 solution and shake well. Leave the mixture to stand for few minutes. Observations: oil does not dissolve in water and forms a separate layer over the surface of water. On adding Sudan 3 solution, the oil appears red in color. On rubbing some fat on white paper, it becomes translucent and glossy.